Hello, it's Tom with Digital Foundry.
And I'm Dave.
So today we thought we'd look at upgrading the Xbox One hard drive to improve loading times. And there are a few options to do this, but obviously, as you know, the Xbox itself has a stock 5400 RPM drive inside it, and you can't access that directly. The way around this is to buy a USB enclosure, a £10 to £15 purchase, or $15 if you're in the US. And the idea is simple: you take whatever drive you want and open it up. There's a SATA connection in there, and then you just insert whatever drive you need. So in this case, we've got the hybrid drive, the Seagate 1TB we've used in our previous PS4 tests, and also the OCZ Trion 100, a 480GB SSD. And the principle is pretty simple. You just slot that in here, and with a bit of a press, it goes in, and you close it up. And from there, it's a simple matter of plugging that into your Xbox. We thought we'd try it on a bunch of games that really needed it, so the likes of Grand Theft Auto 5, Just Cause 3, and The Witcher 3.
So it looks like an easy upgrade path. Let's go and have a look at the results.
Yeah, let's go for it. So let's get the ball rolling with Dead Rising 3. So this was our kind of chosen Xbox One exclusive. We had Bloodborne for the PS4 tests, and the reason for this was basically we had heard that loading times were pretty bad in this one, especially at launch. Now, on the SSD, obviously we're getting much faster speeds, but it's not a massive improvement in terms of the overall sort of percentage. It's about 6 seconds, maybe 8 seconds shaved off the SSD there. And it's a similar story for when we're loading chapters, like the very first one. We're speeding time up on the right there, just so you don't have to sit through the whole thing in real time. But yeah, we don't have to do it too much for this one. It's only 2 times speed up, and again, it's only about 5 seconds.
5 seconds, that's not a huge amount. Not a massive improvement with Dead Rising, but let's see how GTA 5 compares.
Maybe the biggest benefactor of a move to an SSD or hybrid drive. Check this out, the SSD comes in at about 24 seconds and the hybrid not long after that, which cuts off well over a minute from the stock drives, as you'll see. Now we're speeding this up by 7 times now just because, no one's got time to wait around for this. I made a point of loading it at the same place, O'Neill Way, with Trevor, and yeah, that's a massive increase. Obviously, after that load, you don't have to worry about anything else, but I thought it was worth showing. And it's a similar sort of case for Just Cause 3, which was the game that actually spurred on all these hard drive tests. At launch it was pretty bad, and it's still not great with the patch 1.02 installed.
No, over a minute on the SSD. So it's pretty slow and all, but we're still getting a decent chunk of additional speed on the SSD there. So you're not waiting around quite as long.
I'm quite happy with that, actually. It's a good return, but come on, that's way too long to be waiting.
I mean, here it's performing really well. The SSD's already finished at 29 seconds, and the stock drive, it's not bad. It's 2/3 when you move to an SSD of the weight on a stock. Now the thing about this is, Just Cause 3 was notoriously bad at launch for the respawn times, but now it is a lot better. But you still have really long initial loads when you first start the game. For example, this buyer initial load takes, well over a minute on the stock, and you cut that down by about 50 seconds when you move to an SSD. But watch what happens when we blow ourselves up here and retry from the same spot. You do still get a decent upgrade in terms of speed, but it's only by about 5-7 seconds overall, depending on which drive you're using. The stock drive actually isn't too bad nowadays in this sense, and I think you can get away with using it as is on the Xbox One. So let's move on to Fallout 4, fairly recent game, and we're kind of using the main menu to initially load several areas. The kind of takeaway here is that there's not much of an improvement on the hybrid drive, is there? No, it's kind of disappointing in this particular area. It's still 10 seconds behind and only 3 seconds faster than the stock drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid upgrade, but I wouldn't, go out of my way for this one game. I mean, this is Vault 111. It's not the most data-heavy area of the game. In fact, even moving out to the main open world, you're not seeing too much of a gain either side. Again, 10 seconds on the SSD and a sparing few seconds on the hybrid. But where we do see a big gain is Concord Town and Diamond City, like very densely packed areas, lots of NPCs and buildings. And there you're kind of getting the speed you hope for. We're bumping up to 4 times speed so we can skip ahead, and it's 55 seconds on the stock, 26 on the SSD. That's a good saving.
Yeah, and even the hybrid gives you a nice boost in performance. It's noticeably better than the stock drive. It's only slightly slower, so it's a good upgrade there. As you can see there, it's performing really well, while the stock is languishing behind here.
This is one of the cases where you could justify an SSD upgrade, but for certain areas it's maybe not worth it for the hybrid. It really depends. Anyway, let's move on to another open world game, and this is The Witcher 3. We had to bump up speed to 6 times just to get through all these loading screens, but the point is pretty clear, isn't it? It's a roughly 30 seconds shaved off, maybe a bit more, 40 seconds. It's got to be one of the bigger gains on moving to an SSD, and the hybrid drive kind of falls directly between the two. So for the money, that's not too bad, and you do get a bigger drive for a similar price point as the SSD. Another factor of The Witcher 3 is fast traveling. Now obviously this isn't one contingent world, you have to travel to different regions because it's all kind of segregated. So we traveled from Novigrad to Wosong Bridge, and the gain there is, pretty decent. Again, the hybrid falling between the stock and SSD drive results. And this final test is important for showing one thing basically, and that's how long it takes for the game to load after dying and respawning at the same checkpoint. So here it's a pretty decent improvement over the stock drive. We're running at 6 times speed, and that gets us 18 seconds gain there, about 10 on the hybrid. And to be honest, it's not a massive improvement when you're retrying the same section. It's a little bit of a disappointment in a sense, because you'd hope the game would just redraw the same assets and shorten the load time, but it's actually the same as the initial load.
It's very similar, yeah. Although we do see the hybrid at 3 seconds faster, so the cache is working with that one there. Seems to be doing loading some of the data.
Yeah.
Flash portion, but yeah, I agree. It's not a huge difference moving back in the same area. It seems like it's.
This is Project Cars. The point of this is we're loading different tracks and also with varying numbers of cars. The more cars you have on the track, the longer the load time. Obviously, it scales up logically like that, and you get some pretty decent savings on some of these tests. You get about 60% of the weight on an SSD on the Willow Springs, and with the 24 hours Le Mans test, where there's about 44 cars, you can shave off about 11 seconds on the hybrid drive and 14 seconds on the solid state. Not too much of a difference when exiting the menu. We thought we'd give this a try, and basically there's about 20-second wait when you're leaving, and that cuts down to about 18 seconds. If you're doing it just for this game, it's perhaps not worth it. Alright, last on our rung of tests is MGS. So there's a lot of switching about to and from the command center in this game. Improvements really are quite wild in this one. You get the Phantom Limbs mission right at the start, and the stock drive is about 34, and you cut that down way below half on the SSD. Hybrids between the two, it's veering closer to the SSD overall.
We also see a similar story on some of the later missions as well, with the loading times being halved over the stock drive.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Hero's Way, that's 10 versus 25. So overall, the hybrid looks like a very good solution in this game. It comes pretty close to the SSD. So after all that, there are 3 main takeaways. The first being obviously that the SSD is a pretty good way to go. If you want to upgrade it, you're getting kind of like a 50% speed boost in some games. Others it's less impressive, but generally it's what you expected from an SSD. It's fast. There's a second point to this, obviously, which is the SSD and hybrid drives have read and write speeds that aren't being tapped into. There's a lot of potential there, and it's just not being used because we're using a USB 3 interface to the console.
We won't be seeing the same sort of speed as you get on a PC, for example, but it still makes a considerable difference.
And the third thing I guess is worth mentioning, if you remember our PS4 tests ran on stock, they are faster than the Xbox One on stock. Across the board, every game seemed to run faster on PS4 with its default drive. But upgrading both to the SSD you're getting similar loading times across the board. You're going to get a very comparable experience, and it's kind of leveled out in terms of the overall load times. So that's about it, I guess. If you like this video, like and subscribe below, and until next time, thanks for watching.